Well, Trevor, thanks for joining the Disease Discussion Podcast. We're 28 episodes into this series with BASF, and I can't believe this is the first time we've had you on as a guest. Before we just start discussing all things cool and warm season disease, let's introduce you to our listeners. Who is Trevor Stacy, and how would you describe your role at BASF?
Yeah, well, I guess better late than never. So really glad to be on the Disease Discussion Podcast, and so thank you for having me. Just a little bit about me. I mean, I would say at the end of the day, I'm a turf guy at heart. Love the game of golf. Love being able to be involved in an industry that makes the game better. If you'd asked me that question 11, 12 years ago, beginning of May, as I was finishing up my undergrad turf science degree at Purdue, probably would have told you I wanted to be preparing to become a golf course superintendent. But sometimes, life takes some different twists and turns. And about 2 years into being an assistant golf course superintendent, I had the opportunity to return to Purdue for graduate school in turf pathology in Dr. Lattin's lab. And that's just kind of one of those opportunities that when offered to you, you can't turn it down and you don't turn it down. So shifted gears, left the golf course maintenance industry and went back to school, which was a little different after not sitting in a classroom for a couple of years to have to open the books back up. But, just an incredible experience to get to work and learn under Dr. Lattin for a few years at Purdue. And then when I graduated, I actually totally left the turf industry and did fungicide discovery, where I focused on rice, wheat, and soybeans for 3+ years. Definitely a valuable time to venture outside of turf, but what it really did was remind me just how much that I love turf and love golf and love that industry. So feel very fortunate that a little over 3.5 years ago, I was able to join the BASF Turf and Ornamentals technical service team as a technical market manager. So based here in Research Triangle Park in the Raleigh area, and my role is pretty unique. The way I describe it is as a liaison from everything that happens in the office at RTP to our field tech service reps. And never really a boring day for me because I cross paths with pretty much every group in the office, biology, regulatory, as we work on bringing new products to market, updating labels, label extensions, our stewardship team, making sure that, our products are being used responsibly out in the field, marketing, communications, trying to determine the strategy and the messaging that we want our products associated with for golf course superintendents to hear about. And then, finally, our field reps, both tech service and sales reps, because at the end of the day, they're the ones with our customers. So it's a really fun role, and couldn't be happier to be back in the golf and turf industry.
Trevor, Dr. Lattin seriously wrote the book on fungicides. I have it back here on the shelf in my office. What type of experience was it learning under him, and what takeaways from him do you use in your role now?
I think just the foundation that he set for turf diseases. And what I always appreciated about learning under Dr. Lattin was how practical he made everything. And for me, somebody that didn't go straight from undergrad to grad school, that went out and was working on the golf course for a few years, I always viewed everything through the eyes, or tried to view everything through the eyes of a golf course superintendent, because I wanted my research at the end of the day to impact a golf course superintendent down the road. And I'm fortunate enough in the second edition of his book, some of my research in there from my grad school days, but just could not have been a better mentor. Fortunate enough, he's just down the road in Pinehurst to, be able to still have him close, and he still interacts with, me and the BASF team. And again, it was just kind of one of those opportunities that you don't turn down. When I was finishing undergrad, I never really pegged myself as somebody that's like, hey, I want to go back to grad school, but things just kind of worked out, and kind of really cool to be able to say that I was Dr. Lattin's last grad student at Purdue.
And I'm sure later in the podcast, this is a teaser for our listeners, some of the active ingredients and fungicides that are mentioned in that book are going to come up. But let's go back to your personal journey. What do you remember about the first time you spotted disease on a golf course?
It was really early on in my undergrad career. So just kind of, your turf 101 type classes, and you're just kind of getting, acclimated with everything turf science, from the agronomy side to actually growing grass, a little bit disease, a little bit weeds, a little bit insects. You're kind of getting everything thrown at you to develop that base. And I was actually out playing golf with my roommate, who's an engineering student at Purdue, and I noticed some fairy rings. So, a pretty easy disease to pick out and diagnose. And I I nerded out about it, and I called my buddy over, my roommate, and I'm like, you gotta check this out. And I'm, talking to him about it, and I had to kind of stop and think afterwards, like, man, this is the first time I've been with this guy where I was the nerd in the conversation. And it was probably the last time too, he remains one of my best friends to this day, but it really does stick out to me because, it was a unique experience where I'm with a buddy, kind of pretty new into the turf school life, and getting to pick that out on the golf course and share that experience with a friend was pretty cool.
We're recording this podcast in May. What's a cool season disease that wasn't at the front of many superintendents' radars a few years ago that is becoming more prevalent, and what makes that disease so difficult to control?
Yeah, so this is a cool question to get to answer, because especially from a plant pathologist or a turf pathologist standpoint, because it's not every day or even every year that we get to talk about a new disease. And over the last couple years, we've been hearing about a new disease emerging out of the New England area of the country and spreading even more so from there. And this has really been spearheaded by Dr. Iguagada's lab at UConn. What makes it kind of interesting is when it first started popping up, it really resembled like a Wataya patch, which is, pretty common. Guys know how to handle that, comes up every year. But when they started to implement some of the same control methods that you would use for that, the disease, you weren't seeing the same efficacy that you would expect. So as his lab kind of dug more into that, what we found is it's a brand new disease. So the last I heard, it's kind of tentatively called yellow ring patch, and that goes to show how new it truly is they're still going through all the sequencing and trying to determine how to actually classify this disease and what to call it. So that's what then makes it difficult to control, because there's still so many unknowns about it. We had a conversation with him at the New England Turfgrass Conference the beginning of March, and he shared some preliminary data that his lab had done, and they actually had seen some excellent results with Stolomaxtima applications in both the spring and fall. So we still, a ton more research needs to be done on it, but it is encouraging that we do think there's going to be some options that even BASF has that will help superintendents in that area of the country be able to control this disease. And he had even mentioned then too that they had received a sample as far south as Virginia that tested positive for this. So I do think that this will be something that maybe doesn't stay isolated just to the northeast or New England area. So over time, I think it'll be something that needs to be on the radar of all cool season superintendents.
Trevor, I was really fortunate at the 2025 New England show. I got to sit in on Dr. Iguanito's presentation about this disease, and it was one of the most fascinating presentations I've ever heard at an industry conference. And one of his recommended names, you'll probably get this because you're from Indiana and you're probably a basketball guy, is the Hurley disease, because it's pretty intense. And the UConn basketball coach, Danny Hurley, of course, is an intense human being. Once you hear about these new disease, how do you react as a manufacturer? Do you start running trials with some of your fungicides when you start hearing something new might be out in the field affecting your customers?
Particularly when, there's a particular, in this case, turfgrass pathologist that's working on it. You certainly want to offer up solutions that are already in your portfolio that you think may give some efficacy to the disease. It's tough to go out and structure full protocols right away because you don't know what you don't know type of thing. But that's where it's been really nice that he's included a wide range of products, and I think the most successful has been with the DMIs, and then even more so with Maxtima, because we had a conversation with him where he asked us even like, hey, do you have any insight as to why Maxtima may be working better than some of the other DMIs? And because it's a new disease, we really don't at this point. But that's where as a basic manufacturer with a biology and research wing, then that's on us to also kind of help along as to why we're seeing, the chemistry work the way that it's working. So it's always great to be able to partner with our cooperators out in the field when problems, whether they're new or old, arise. So those relationships are incredibly important, that, academia shares with us in industry.
Okay, let's ask the same question for a region with a different growing cycle. What's a warm season disease that wasn't at the front of many superintendents' radars a few years ago that is becoming more prevalent?
So I'd say the biggest disease issue on warm season greens has become take all root rot. And when that first was sort of being researched by Dr. Bruce Martin, it was kind of being considered more of a stress-induced root decline, even called Bermuda grass decline. But since then, and as more research and work has went into that, realized that it's really an incredibly complex issue and has been kind of difficult to manage as well. There's at least 5 different species of fungi that are associated with this take-all root rot. And oftentimes while you're dealing with that, you've also got Pythium root rot or nematode issues going on too. So it's not just a singular pathogen that you're dealing with on the warm season Bermuda grass greens. So to kind of even make it more difficult, there's a wide window when the conditions are favorable. I think at the beginning, initially, people were waiting a little bit later, late summer or fall to kind of try to tackle this after symptoms have already appeared. And as more and more research has been done, it's shown that the earlier in the summer that you can make some of these applications, the better off you are going later into the year. And then the other component of that is you can, make the correct application, but it's incredibly important for these that the fungicides are then watered in. We've seen huge differences in watered in versus not watered in and how they perform and the efficacy of that. We hear from superintendents all the time that, hey, I didn't get the control I was expecting. And then it comes to find out, hey, they made the application and didn't spin the heads afterwards to water the product in. And that makes sense if you really think about it, right? All the issues that are happening are below the surface. They're at the root level. If you can't get the active ingredient down to where the pathogen is, your likelihood for success is greatly decreased.
What are some fungicides that are effective in controlling take-all root rot?
So for us, Navicon's really been a big star for that pathogen. So we've really leaned on that, and that brings the mefentrifluconazole part from Maxtima, and then you're getting the pyraclostrobin, which is an intrinsic product of ours, which does a lot of things in its own right. So we've really seen a lot of success with Navicon there.
Yep. Everybody listening to this knows it's all about your greens, especially when you get into the heat of the summer. What does a proactive spray program on cool season greens look like in your mind? How would it be structured?
So for me, it is preventative. And if you can do it every 14 days, right? Like it's the most important acreage on the golf course. So this is where you want to use your heavy hitters, especially at the most stressful times. And that's why we love our holiday spray program where, that puts, in our mind, our big hitters, our Navicons, our Lexicons, stationed kind of at those most stressful times for a cool season superintendent. Your 4th of July's, your Labor Days, when you're right in the thick of that kind of 100 days of hell, right? So, the preventative aspect, and then using your big hitters and keeping that window tight. And then to me too, I think, and this is unfortunately from experience, it's kind of easy when you get in the fall and you get past Labor Day and you get past the fall aerification to let your guard down just a little bit. And I've seen that fall flush a dollar spot be some of the most aggressive. And when that happens, you get some of that pitting of the turf. And then now guess what? Like you're in late October, you've got the heavy frost, you've got snowflakes right around the corner. Turf isn't growing out of that. So make sure you finish your season out too, right? Like I know it's tough. You feel like you've made it through the summer, you've made it through the worst of it, but make sure you're getting those final couple sprays in the fall, so that you go into your winter time with clean greens. So that way when you come out in the spring, you're ready to rock and roll.
Obviously greens are the highest value acreage, but fairway conditioning and expectations keep soaring. What are some strategies you have for developing a proactive spray program for fairways? Just
like with greens, preventative. Like I know, fairway, the spray interval windows, we can get longer with that, and that's fine in most instances unless you're under, crazy pressure. But that first spray, starting yourself up in the spring for success, I think is so important. When you think about, pathogens and how they work, the population is growing before you may see symptoms. And at that point, you're playing catch up kind of the whole year. So if you can get that first preventative spray down and then kind of get yourself on a nice solid 21-day, spray window after that, I think you have, a really good chance for success. And then on fairways too, I think the second, kind of most important thing is make sure that the products you're putting in the tank are targeted at the diseases that would be prevalent at that time. Like it's easy to kind of fall in that, more extended window. And, maybe it's middle of the summer and hey, like it's brown patch weather. You better have a brown patch product in the tank, because that's what you're set up for. That's obviously still important on greens, but when you're at a 14-day window and you're rotating products so much, the likelihood is, you're going to have something in the tank that's going to, catch that over a 14-day window. But when you get onto fairways and you stretch that application interval out just a little bit, just be really mindful of what diseases are occurring at what point throughout the season to make sure that the application, that the product you're putting in the tank kind of gives you your best bang for the buck.
Okay, we're going to go back to warm season grass. We're more than a decade and a half into the full throttle shift from bent grass to Bermuda grass across warm season environments. What are some of the biggest disease concerns on Bermuda grass greens?
Yeah, and it's super true. Even here in the Raleigh area, there's a handful of courses that are still left with bent grass greens. And actually the one just down the road from me here is going to convert this summer from bent grass to Bermuda. So that transition is still happening, over the past decade. And, outside of take all root rot, mini ring is another big issue that has been coming up on Bermuda grass greens. And then kind of like what we mentioned with the take all root rot, it's not just that could be affecting. It's, you've got your Pythium root rot going on as well. And then things like fairy ring are still, popping up on Bermuda grass greens. So, you think when you make the switch from bent grass to Bermuda, it's like, it's a, much less susceptible type of turf grass to diseases. But at the end of the day, there's still more than enough disease issues on Bermuda grass greens to keep superintendents busy.
When is the superintendent most likely to encounter disease issues on Bermuda grass greens?
The simple and kind of easy and maybe even default answer to that is, in the fall when your growth starts to slow, your recovery potential for Bermuda grass is kind of slowing down as that plant's getting ready to go either into dormancy or really slow down from, when it's in its heyday with those mid upper 90s, high humidity, high heat where it's loving life. But I think the reality is there's really some disease issues that you need to be concerned about year round with Bermuda grass greens. I mean, spring and summer for fairy ring. You've got, like I said, about the take all root rot, research has shown that earlier summer applications there have been more efficacious. And then when you get into the fall, you still got, additional take all root rot applications. You've got mini ring applications from late summer. Your spring dead spot, you can't forget about that. That, has to go down in the fall. So there's really not just a time of year, I think, that you can take your foot off the gas when managing Bermuda grass greens either. But certainly when it goes into the fall and that plant is starting to slow down, I mean, that has to be top of mind for when you need to be concerned. But it's a year-round job to manage Bermuda grass greens, I would say.
What type of program does BASF recommend on Bermuda grass greens?
So, I mean, again, just like on cool season, we kind of build everything around the holiday spray, and it's just that the holidays are a little bit different, and it kind of alludes to that fall timing when things start to slow down. You're starting at Halloween instead of starting on Memorial Day like you do for cool seasons. But again, that's where, we really like to see you bring out the heavy hitters like Navicon and Lexicon and kind of build your spray program out from there. But then also, like mentioned, you still got to kind of be mixing in some different things, in the spring and summer for some of those other diseases that can kind of rear their head if you're caught napping.
What issues are you and the BASF team observing on Bermuda grass fairways in recent years?
I would say the big issue on Bermuda grass fairways remains spring dead spot. We're that time of year in the Raleigh area right now where, the Bermuda's starting to green up. And, I've been out walking some golf courses and you still see it. You still see, spring dead spot. And it sticks out really easy right now as things start to green up. So I think that remains the thing that, guys battle the most from a disease standpoint on Bermuda grass fairways is spring dead spot.
And what type of solutions do you and the team recommend to help superintendents handle spring dead spot?
So Max Tima has just been, an absolute champ when it comes to spring dead spot. So we've had a lot of success with that at the high rate fall applications. So, and that's the thing that makes root diseases so challenging, right? Is we're seeing the damage now in the spring, but obviously it's way too late to make any sort of application. All that damage happened, when you got the decreasing soil temperatures in the fall, and that's really where you have to be making that targeted spray. So, but yeah, Max Tima at the high rate has been a winner for us.
Are you and the BASF team advocates for sticking to the program plotted at the beginning of a season, or are you proponents of making in-season adjustments? I know it's a tricky question to answer, and you're probably going to say it depends, but how do you feel about sticking to that calendar or adjusting as the weather goes along?
Yeah, so and it is a tricky question, and like for me, I'm a planner, right? So like I at the beginning of the year having a calendar laid out and having like, these are when my green sprays are happening. This is what's going in the tank for those. This is when the fairway sprays are happening. This is what's going in the tank for those. But like you absolutely have to be flexible to Mother Nature and the weather, because if you're not, you're setting yourself up for failure. No 2 years are alike. And there's some ways when you're setting up that initial calendar, like you can certainly rely on previous years, plans and when you sprayed, but like Mother Nature doesn't care if it's April or May. I mean, it's when we're recording this right now, guy, it's May 1st in Raleigh and it feels like a mid-March day. So, Mother Nature doesn't care what the calendar says, whether it's Sunday or Wednesday. So you have to adjust accordingly, for what the weather presents to you. But I feel like if you have a plan to begin with, that's a lot easier to make adjustments than if you just kind of wait around until it's time to make that first spray and you're like, man, I have no idea. Let's go into the chemical shed and start looking around. So it's not even really an it depends answer. I think it's both. Have a plan, but then be flexible enough to make adjustments as the weather dictates. Just like, you say when we're out playing golf and it starts raining or it's windy, like you're playing an outdoor sport, you have to take weather conditions into consideration. It's no different as you're managing turf. You are outside. You have to take what Mother Nature serves up to you.
How rewarding is it to be behind the scenes and help customers like you do in your role when you hear that they got through the season relatively unscathed?
I mean, to me, that's the best part of the job. And that's, what I've kind of spent the last 6 to 8 years kind of striving for, from like when I went back to grad school and the research project that I had there. Like I wanted that to ultimately produce something that could help superintendents be more successful, because I was in those shoes for a few years. Like I know how incredibly difficult that job is. And if something that we can do at BASF makes their life just a little bit easier or makes their golf course just a little bit better, like when we hear those stories, like to me, that's what it's all about. Like that's where I, get the most pumped up, because again, I love playing golf. Like I love to enjoy the end product of what a superintendent is producing. So, I mean, that's the best part of the job.
How glad as a turfgrass pathologist are you that you landed in the transition zone? It's got to be a fascinating place to work in your role.
It's awesome because you get to see everything. I mean, every end of the spectrum. My first assistant superintendent job was actually in Richmond, Virginia, at a 36-hole facility. At the time, 18 was all cool season, and the other 18 had bent grass greens, but everything else was Bermuda grass. So I've kind of spent my entire turf career in the transition zone and getting to see It's the hardest place to grow grass because whether you pick cool season, whether you pick warm season, you've got a part of the year where the grass isn't going to be happy. You're fighting through the summer if you're growing cool season grass, and you're worried about winter kill and all sorts of things that can happen to the warm season grass on that side. And I guess even to that point, you wouldn't think of West Lafayette, Indiana as the transition zone, but Ross-Ade Stadium, Bermuda grass. So it's just challenges, all the way around when you're in the transition zone. So it's been a fun place to work because I feel like if you can grow grass in the transition zone, you can grow grass anywhere.
Yeah. Anything that we didn't ask you here about cool or warm season disease control that you want to add to the discussion?
What I really want to do is just reiterate the preventativeness. That was one of the things that I took from Dr. Latin too. You just can't play catch up. The second that you get behind, you're just chasing all season. So that first spray is so important. Watching to see what your pressure is going to look like and proactively tightening your spray intervals. If you're a 21 day guy and pressure is going to be high, go ahead and make that application at day 14 or even day 17 if you can, because in the long run, what you're going to end up doing is saving yourself a lot of money, a lot of time, and you're going to have much better turf conditions. So that's to me is the big take home point when we're talking about disease control and disease prevention, is to be preventative with your applications, and it makes your life a lot easier.
One of the many endearing qualities about golf course superintendents is their curiosity. How can a curious superintendent get a hold of you or somebody on the BASF team that maybe has a question that wasn't asked on this podcast by the host here?
Yeah, so multiple different ways to get a hold of us. You can start with your sales rep that is in the field in each region, your tech service rep that is in the field in each region, website, just reach out to your DSR. They can also point you to your BASF rep, and we're a resource, and we're happy to be a resource, happy to answer questions and try to solve problems. Like I told you earlier, where I find the most joy in my job and in this industry is seeing golf course superintendents succeed, because again, I know how difficult of a job it is, and if there's a way that we can help and support in any way, that's what we're here for.
Well, Trevor, you absolutely nailed your first disease discussion appearance. This was a fun conversation. Who knew a Boilermaker and a Hoosier could get along so well on a podcast like this? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. But more importantly, thanks for what BASF and your team does to make golf a better game.
Absolutely. Thank you, Guy. And I can't wait to be back again.